Thank you so much for still joining Tea or Coffee this morning. This morning, we have two guests that will be having this conversation with us. Our first guest is Owa Ayodele Samuel. And just before I introduce him and then we get into the topic, there's another case study that I would like to share. Earlier on, we read a story about a woman who eventually left her husband because he had stroke and she could not cope, and she left her baby, a breastfeeding baby, and all of that. And Bolade and I were trying to get into the thick of that situation and really understand the nuances and all the little tidbits that were connected to that story. Now, here is another story that might give an idea into what stroke or how people can handle stroke differently. Okay? When I think of childhood, I think of two faces over and over me as they tucked me in bed. I remember the musical laughter and the joy in their eyes. Ours was a beautiful home, and Daddy was the center of our world. He worked hard to make us comfortable, and everything was just fine until that sting that unsettled our lives. They say life is no fairy tale, but forgot to add that for some, the pain might come a little earlier. It was the darkest moment of my life. I was young and helpless. I stared in confusion as life dealt my family a fatal blow. The laughter was gone, and in its place was the aftertaste of a sour dream. It is a story of loss, pain, and trauma. This is a story of a childhood I never had. The year was 1997. My father had gone missing, and for 30 agonizing days, we checked police stations and mortuaries, but he was nowhere in sight. Finally, news came as to his whereabouts, but by the time we saw him, his condition was irreversible. He had suffered his first stroke attack, and for 5 days, he was left for dead at the Ikorodu Expressway. Found by an angel of mercy, he was taken to a Trado religious center where his condition worsened for the next 25 days. It was in this half-dead state we found my father. He depended on us for everything, and like a child, we bathed him, fed, and saw to all his needs. Nothing hurts a man's ego more than having to depend on others for the barest essentials of life. 15 long years struggled on his lips, showing a man having, 15 long years struggled on his lips, and sometimes all he could do by himself was cry. It was a heart-wrenching sight. Tears came in a heavy downpour, and as we wiped his, ours flowed freely. Life was gradually ebbing out of him. With no breadwinner, my mother worked extra hours to provide for the family. Money came in trickles. I started a phone call business, and with an uncle's support, we were able to afford his medications and checkups. But help had come too late. 15 years after, my father died, with his dreams and aspirations cut at the prime of his life. My blood curdles just remembering this. But time passed and pain turned to memory. I shared this story today with pain in my heart, for words unsaid, dreams and goals left to rust. But with the benefit of hindsight, I know there are things we could have done otherwise while we could. And I'll have no rest until I contribute my bit to help people with this condition. Today, we dare to stretch a helping hand to those in need of it. This is another story, and seated with me in the studio this morning is Owa Samuel Ayodele. It's actually his own personal story. Owa Samuel runs an NGO that is specifically tailored towards catering to those people who have had stroke and, giving them the support that is necessary. Thank you so much for joining me this morning on the show.
Thank you, MC. Good morning.
I can't imagine how it must have felt for you having to go through this. I believe you're familiar with the first case study
Yes,
that we
correct.
mentioned on the show today. let's look at the emotions of support systems.
Yeah.
The people who, I mean, not to neglect the emotions of the person who has had stroke or who is in this unfortunate situation.
Yeah.
But let's first look at the emotions of support system. How does anyone cope in that kind of situation?
Wow, let me see. It's not easy, I'm going to say. First of all, there's what I call an unconscious emotional breakdown that people go through in our society. In my own case, it was unconscious because I began to realize as I grew older that I'd bottled up a lot of emotions. Um, um, uh, that as to why was he my father? Why should it have happened to my father? Um, and luckily, when you compare the two stories,
Yes.
my father had his first stroke in 1997, and he survived for 15 years. My dad died at 56 years old. That means he had his first stroke at 41. So similarities in the case study. But my mom stayed. Unlike the other story, my mom stayed and ensured that I am what I am today. Well, it wasn't easy for her. My mom is still, so now I have 3 kids and she's looking after my last born, who is 10 months old. So my mom made it a point of duty to ensure that my life was secure, that I am what I am today, that I am not a miscreant. So if my mom was not in the picture, because of all the bottled emotions and all the pains that I was going through,
Yeah.
it's pain that you can't feel, it's pain that you can't see, and it's pain from the heart and the mind. This affects your psyche. You don't want to you don't want to study, you don't want to do the good things again. You might want to become a miscreant in the society and all of that. Luckily for me, I am -1 miscreant to the society. I am a plus to my society. Today I'm an architect, I'm practicing. All thanks to how the story was.
It's a heavy one to actually deal with. So let's look at the general perception of society towards people who have stroke and how they should be treated.
Okay. So society now is still the same 15 years ago, where my dad, was on the floor for 9 days by the roadside, by the express, unattended to. People didn't know what was happening to him. People thought he was a madman. People thought, oh, okay, maybe he was a thief. Or, he was there for 9 days by the express road in Lagos, unattended to. Right, so that gives a perfect picture of how the society is today, where nobody really knows what stroke is, or nobody really knows what to do next when someone suffers a stroke. And one of the things that I am trying to do is to create so much awareness, just to make lots of noise about this thing, share my story as much as I could to people, and let people know that, when someone suffers a stroke attack, time is of the essence, and also to ensure that there's some healthcare programs in place, possibly by individuals or by the government. Something has to be put in place to urgently attend to people that have this attack. It is very important, and that is why one of the reasons why we started the NGO.
Okay. In your story, you stated that there were things that you could have done better, with the benefit of insight,
Yeah.
that there are things you could have done better when you still had the chance. What were those things?
Okay. So I'll start with medical care. Because my dad was the breadwinner, and he had suffered a stroke. He couldn't walk. He couldn't do anything. It took us time to recover from all those things. So a lesson for me there is that for any family, I want to encourage the men to allow their women also to work. Sometimes a woman might be the breadwinner of a home. It's not a curse, it's not a disease. Allow your woman to work. Because my dad really, did not allow my mom to work. And, you know, nobody planned for a stroke attack. And when it happened, um, it deepens poverty in that family. It deepens poverty. I was doing well in school, luckily for me. But after secondary school, then I'll come back home and sell, so they call it meats. So I'll sell fried meats. They call it Inko. I don't know
Yeah,
if you
I know
know.
Cinco.
Fried meat, fried stuff in show glass. And when my colleagues are coming from school, I would hide my bag so that they would
No
not see me.
see you.
Because in school, I was actually doing very well. So the one thing so encourage your spouse to also work. It's a collective effort raising a family. Two is we did not have access to good medical care, probably because we couldn't afford it. And so we just sat down there that, oh, we couldn't afford it. Don't sit down there. We should have spoken out. We should have spoken out. We should have written to people, written to just make it public that, guys, you know, my dad had a stroke, but we can't afford this. You know, we should have reached out to NGOs. We should have reached out to organizations at that time. Those things we did not do. We couldn't afford physiotherapy sessions. We couldn't afford even drugs. We had to, you know, it was one of our uncles that called and, you know, helped us with his medications. So, not to say so much, those two things I felt that we should have done better in handling his case. The things that we did good were, you know, being the emotional strength for my dad at that time. Although I was in school, I would always come back home during holidays or weekends to ensure that I spent some time with my dad. We'd sit out at the terrace of our house and we'll have conversations, you know. We would just have those conversations, and most times I look at him and I see regrets. You know, he wished he was going to be a better man for me at that time when I was young. But you know, I understood him and I gave him those comforts, which I think helped also in prolonging his life for that far.
So let's look at, because you mentioned now about being an emotional support. Let's look at situations where maybe some people watching at home right now have this kind of situation on their hands. What would you say to a support system or a caregiver, you know, on how best? Now, and I'm not talking in terms of medically, I'm talking about the relationship aspect of it.
Yeah.
How best to care for someone who has had a stroke.
Okay. So stroke, just like so I'll take a cue from cancer, for instance. People who have cancer need lots of, you know, emotional strength around them. They need lots of people to tell them, you know. So it's a different case when you know that, okay, your set day to leave the earth has been set, and then you are looking forward to that date. But you know, how does your mind carry that information? How do you process it so that you don't even pass on before that date? In the case of a stroke, right, so it's not set. You know life is ebbing out of you. You know you are losing life, but you don't know when. So, and you're a human being. Now the emotional strength comes in just being around the person, spend quality time with the person, encourage the person. So my dad would, you know, at that time he wanted to fight it. So anytime he wanted to do something, we would try to assist him. He started to stop us, and he would insist that he did those things by himself. I mean, that alone was an inner strength, you know, for him. So also encourage people with stroke. Not to say it's not the end of the world, you know. You can still get rehabilitated and function with the impairment that you have.
So you mentioned something that finding him in that state did something, and it struck you that a lot of people don't know what to do.
Yeah.
They can't recognize what the symptoms of someone having a stroke looks like.
Yeah.
They don't know if this person is just lying down there, if person is drunk or whatever. They just see somebody lying down there, and everybody just keeps going back and forth. Nobody's saying what is going on here. Now, do you think it is a result of social conditioning to say, stay out of trouble, maybe they felt he was dead and they didn't want police case or a drama about where did you find this body and all of that. Would you say that was the major reason that happened?
Okay, I'm gonna so that story I'm gonna go back like 2 letters backwards,
Okay.
to give you more insight to that question. So my dad was coming in a commercial bus. He was going home, coming back from work, and in the bus, he said he was telling me the story and telling us. He said he felt a vibration where he was sitting, prrr, and that was all, and that was all. And the conductor came to ask him for his transport fare. But he could not move his hand. He could not do anything. He was just staring, blankly at the conductor. The conductor was, oh, are you trying to pretend don't you want to pay the transport fare and all of that? That is how they behave. Don't mind them. That erupted in the bus then. And when they got to the final bus stop, my dad had probably missed his own bus stop. When they got to the final bus, they said, this man, you don't want to pay and you don't want to get out of the bus. And they dragged him out. Get down, get down. And, they dragged him down and he was on the floor, right? So one of the things that we do, or one of our campaigns that we did in 2017 was to go back to the bus parks and to the market women and begin to tell them about stroke. We began to sensitize and create awareness. Now, the society lacks awareness. The society that we live in do not know the symptoms. They don't know the signs. They don't know what to watch out for. When someone slumps and falls, we don't know the first things to do. There are no the responses to take. There are no emergency numbers to call. And like you said, Yemisi, in the society, so people don't want to be associated to. So when the police now come, they say, they found a dead man in your custody, or they found a man that is sick in your custody. And the society needs to to be regrouted in this light. And somebody needs to step out and be that grouting machine. And that is what we're trying to do in the NGO, creating awareness, sensitizing the public, also sensitizing the health agencies, and creating support systems that people will be enlightened to know about this illness, and people will know what to do and how to manage going forward.
Okay, so let's also look at that case study.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think that woman could have done differently?
Honestly, that case study is a very touching one. So a man at 40 marries a woman. I'm assuming the woman is probably
In
between
her 30s?
35,
Thereabout?
in her 30s, between 35 to 38. She's still young, she's still vibrant, she's still out there. And, she has dreams for her life. Unfortunately, that happened. And, the confines of marriage says for better, for worse, right? But, we just make those pronunciations out of the tongue. It doesn't come out of the heart, right? But I can only answer, I'm not in her shoes, but I can only answer based on my own experience, where, my mom took it on that, no, this man must not die. My kids must succeed. My kids, she wants to see her kids. So in that case study, there is a newborn, there's a baby,
Yeah.
Yes, there's a baby. So, I mean, in my own case, we're not babies. I was probably 7 years old.
How
My
many
sister,
siblings did you have?
my younger sister was probably 5 years. So we had, even our family members from our side were asking my mom that, how are you going to now send these children to school? Let them go and learn a trade. Maybe I probably would have been a carpenter today. But good profession. Let them go and learn a trade. Let them go and sell stuff by the roadside. Those were the suggestions that we were getting. But thank God that my mother had her own better ideas, and she ensured that she saw to this. So in that case, I don't know if the woman is watching, but there's a child involved, and you might want to consider the future of your child, if not for the man. If I know it's a shock, when you finally, maybe after 2 years of wedding, you finally find out that your husband is incapacitated and cannot, function as a man
And
again.
she's probably acting out of shock and
Yes,
inability to reconcile her feelings.
definitely. That is what is happening. And I'm sure wherever she is now, she's trying to, still trying to, she can't
Make
fathom it
sense
in
of
her
it.
mind. But I want her to look at the future and what legacy she wants to leave behind. And look at the life of that child, even not for anything. Look at the life of that child and look at the future of that child and start, and just be there for the child. And also encourage the man, because, when a man and a woman raises up a child, the child, will forever be grateful for it. If my mom had left, I'd probably be angry, unconscious anger, and I'd probably unleash those angers, at other people. I'd probably, God forbid, I'd probably be a robber. I'll be a miscreant. I'll be a menace to my society. So thank God for motherly care. And thank God, for the love that I witnessed, even while my dad was sick and my mom together. I saw them. It's still in my mind. Thank God for those things, which has helped to shape me to what I am today.
Okay, so from your experience running the NGO and all the sensitizations that you've had to do, what are the first things that, what are the first signs that people should look out for? And how can bystanders or whoever is seeing that happen, what can that person do in the immediate to at least respond quickly?
Okay, so time is of the essence. When it comes to stroke, time is of the essence. And I came in with a medical doctor who is also a volunteer at Hope for Stroke. And we were discussing, and she said, the brain cells start to die after 10 minutes. So when there's a blockage, blockage to oxygen flow to that part of the brain, after 10 minutes, the brain cell starts to die if you don't get medical attention. Now, what are the signs? So we have so there's this acronym we have FACE. It's FACE. So you face, arm, I can't remember C.
Is it chest? Is it tightening in chest?
No, I'll leave that to the medical doctor.
Okay.
But I'll talk about the F and the A. So F is the face. So there's going to be a drop in the face. So when you look at someone's eyes and the face, you notice that one part is
dripping.
higher. Yeah, one part drips and one part is higher. Those are early signs. The A, the arm. So when you ask the person to lift up their arms, you find out that one arm is higher than the other. That means that part is losing coordination. So those are quick tests that you can ask people to do.
But the ones that people don't know, I mean, like in your dad's case, he was in the bus going home having his normal life that day, and that just suddenly happened. How does anyone react in that kind of situation?
That's a tough one. But okay, so I'll speak on two things. I'll answer your question. I'll speak. The first thing is not to get into that kind of situation. So up until that time, I never noticed my dad paying attention to his health. So I remember that time, he would ask me to go and buy a brand of painkillers. I bought those brands for him every day. He probably had a headache. He probably was stressed at work. He probably was feeling pains in his body. And all those things. So for you not to get to that stage where it's a shock and it happens suddenly, luckily, thank God he was not even driving himself. In that case study, he was driving, and they were very lucky not to have had an accident that would take lives. So in order not to get to the situation, first of all, you want to pay attention to your health. You want to start to check your blood pressures constantly every day. If you notice there are hereditary traits in your family, you want to pay attention more. You want to have some lifestyle modifications. You want to start doing some workouts, and you want to make those things habits every day. You want to ensure and control what goes into your body systems. You want to start and do all those things. And when anytime you feel stressed at work, or you feel some emotional imbalances and some mental unwellness, you want to get good medical advice on time, so that you don't deteriorate to that stage. So, but if you find yourself in that stage, honestly, there's nothing you can do. You are helpless, and it's just the society, the people around you, who we hope will be aware, will be able to help you out in that situation.
It's been an eye-opening conversation. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me this morning. But we need to take a break because we have a medical doctor that will shed more light on the things, the signs you need to look out for, and the healthy lifestyle that you need to actually get into ASAP to avoid a situation whereby you get stroke. Thank you once more for joining me.
Thank you.
We'll go on this break. When we come back, Omo Bolade will be having a conversation with the doctor. Don't go anywhere. Thank you for staying tuned to us. This is Tea or Coffee. The conversation is on stroke. Now, we have learned a couple of things from the story that we've heard earlier from Owa Samuel, and it's a heartfelt one. But now we need to know what to do, and that's why we have a medical doctor in the studio with us. Her name is Hannah Babalola, and she is a medical doctor, and she'll be breaking down what stroke is, what we're supposed to do, who is predisposed, what are the risk factors, and how you can start to live a healthy life. Good morning, Hannah. How are you doing?
Good morning. I'm good. How are you doing too?
I'm okay. I'm fine. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, we have shared two stories on stroke. One that we found online, another one of Owa Samuel, his story, his family, and it's a really touching one.
True.
But then the conversation is stroke. What is stroke?
Okay, thank you very much. So I think one thing every one of us need to understand about stroke is that it's a medical emergency. Okay, because I can relate with the story that was shared earlier on with Mr. Owa, and how that he talked about how that for 9 days, I think, people were staring at his father on the floor. But when we understand that it's a medical emergency, it's not a time when you want to start dilly-dallying, understanding, okay, should I take the person up or not? Because time is of essence. So the longer it takes, the more damage is happening. So just to give a brief definition of what stroke is, stroke basically involves the damage to the brain cells, which can be as a result of an interruption to the blood flow. Okay, and let me just bring that home. There's something that we can easily relate with, so not to bring up the medical jargon, okay, that could be very confusing. So let's see an apartment, right, as the brain, our apartment, our home, as the brain, and the water reservoir tank outside as the heart, and the piping system as the blood vessels, right? So if there's anything wrong with the water reservoir, which is the heart, not being able to pump blood to the apartment, realize that, okay, you won't get your water supply,
Yes.
the house will be messy, you can't wash your dishes and all. That's what happens to the brain because the heart has failed, it can't pump enough blood. But what if the heart is okay and there's an issue with the piping system? That's the blood vessels, right? Maybe there's an obstruction somewhere, and before the blood vessels can easily, the flow rate is quite consistent, but now there's a narrowing, there's an obstruction somewhere. It affects the amount of blood that gets to the apartment, which is the brain. Do you understand? So eventually the brain cells start dying, and that's when stroke actually comes about.
So how does this even happen? Like, when do you get to this point? When do people get to? I mean, you hear stories that it happened all of a sudden. For instance, Owa's father didn't know. He was living his daily life. The first story that we shared, he works for a ride-hailing company. He was driving his customers, and he had a stroke, and he had an accident. So how does this even happen?
Okay, very, very nice to see that, because I think most people for some people, rather, they would have warning signs of stroke, like, okay, they just have some, some symptoms. Like, I think in his case, he mentioned something about always getting these pain medications for his father. Maybe he was having a headache or so, and it's one of the signs of stroke, warning signs of stroke, this persistent headache, okay? But most people, because it's very common, when you have a headache, the first thing they think about, okay, maybe malaria or so, they start going to the pharmacy, getting over-the-counter drugs, getting medication, pain-killing, pain-relieving medication, not knowing that it's actually a warning sign. So, but it's not all cases, actually. And not to really veer off, another warning sign that could actually come is, okay, they were trying to mention an acronym, which is the FAST, right? The F being that the face, there could give me a very nice smile there, and you just maybe shine your teeth or do like, you get, so it's symmetrical. Do you understand? The way this responds to that smile is the same way the other part responds to the smile. But someone that has stroke, there will be a deviation, sort of. It becomes asymmetrical. This part of your, maybe the left or the right side is responding to the smile, while the other side is just paralyzed and relaxed. So you realize that there's a deviation with this person. What is really happening? Do you understand? Another thing that could happen is that there could be a weakness on the person's arm, difficult to raise their arm up. So they will be thinking that could it be something else? So these are the signs I think we need to know. And also speech, which is the S, part of the FAST. The S is the speech. Okay, they could maybe start developing a difficulty in calling sentences as small as saying, I want to eat. They start finding it hard to express themselves. You know how painful that could be. So this could be the warning sign. And sometimes it could be a blurry vision. And the reason being that every part of our brain has one part, as a particular part they are controlling. Do you understand? There's a part that controls the speed, there's a part that controls, even as holding this cup of tea, the way your body have to coordinate, the muscles have to coordinate each other to hold the cup of tea is controlled by the brain. So once there's a damage, there's an obstruction somewhere, it affects, that brain cell dies, and it affects what that part of the brain controls. Okay, so there are so many warning signs. So people have these warning signs, but because they are not aware about it, they don't know. They end up treating something entirely different before it eventually happens. However, some cases don't come with warning signs. Yes, they don't come in, and that could be, okay, for example, one of the major causes of stroke is hypertension. And today we know hypertension as a silent killer. Some people could actually have elevated blood pressure and they are living sedentary lifestyle. For example, take a banker, maybe from 8 to, I don't know, maybe to 5, they're on their seat throughout. They're not moving around, no exercise whatsoever. They are busy from, Monday to Friday, weekend, they want to just rest. They don't have time to check their blood pressure or anything. So not knowing that there's actually an impending danger. Do you get? So, so it could actually come with warning signs, and for some cases, it could just happen.
Wow, that's like a lot. So now, for cases that just happens, what happened? What causes these things? Because, like, I'm looking at it and I'm looking at, warning signs. At least that, okay, so there's headaches, there's this, there's that. You can go to the hospital, you can check it, and things will be done quickly. There are times where we just say, oh, it's not my headache, there's no need and all. At least that something had triggered what has happened to you. But for people that nothing triggered it, like it just happens and then they just slump, and all of a sudden they can't move a part of their body, they can't move their face, they can't move their limbs and all of that. How did they get to that particular point?
Okay, that's very beautiful. I think that would maybe take us to the risk factors of stroke. We have something we call medically, we call it modifiable risk factors, and the other non-modifiable. What modifiable means is that something that you can actually have control over. Okay. For example, you are hypertensive, or not you.
I understand.
Okay, the person could be hypertensive, right, or diabetic, hypertensive diabetic, right, or adopt some unhealthy lifestyle like smoking, do you understand, taking of alcohol and the likes. This could actually cause the person to have a higher risk of having stroke. And the other non-modifiable factors are the ones that you can't really do without. You can't decide the family you come into. That's the family, people that have family history of stroke. You can't determine, okay, the family lineage I will come out from. You can't determine your age, okay. You obviously, the older we get, there's a higher risk of actually having stroke. So such cases could actually predispose people to have stroke, and they might not even have the warning sign. But for people that that have the family history of stroke, it's very possible that you have a family history of stroke and you don't eventually have stroke. Why? Because you're able to understand early enough that, oh, my family have this history. However, I need to adopt some healthy lifestyle, right? I need to adopt. You can imagine that kind of person having a family history of stroke, and you are smoking, and you are, eating every fatty substance you can ever see in life. It's like you are complicating the matter. But for someone that is aware about, okay, my family, there's this history of hypertension, okay, there's this history of this, I think I need to really work on my diet because I don't want to fall victim. Some families, they have history of obesity, they're overweight, you're not the kind, and if you have that understanding, you should be checking your BMI, your weight regularly. You should pay attention to your health because you don't want to fall under that, circumstance. And all that causes that's the modifiable factors. We can have increase in cholesterol, hypertension, diabetics, and the likes. Do you understand? So these are the things that can actually predispose someone to having stroke.
So I mean, you said something about people having a family history of hypertension and all that. Are you saying that stroke can be hereditary?
Okay, yeah, I can say so. Why? Because the risk factors of stroke are hereditary. Diabetes diabetes is hereditary. Hypertension is hereditary. Okay, and even beyond that, you can realize that some families, even beyond the gene and genetic makeup and all, as the families that because for example, let's take both of us as sisters, right? The same family and all. You can realize that we feed on the same type of food. We consume the same type of food. We adopt the same type of lifestyle.
We live in the same space and
exactly. So you
environment.
might not really know that it's probably because what we do together as a family is what actually predisposes us to having stroke, and not really because we have it as a genetic makeup.
Okay.
Do you understand? And maybe maybe generation after generation they consume, that unhealthy lifestyle, and it becomes and also you think that, okay, I think this is hereditary, but it's actually because they are family members and they consume, they're exposed to the same thing. Do you understand? And it keeps reoccurring in the family until maybe one of them gets that understanding that, hey, look out, we need to look out on what we are feeding on because it's quite detrimental to our health.
Okay.
So I think that part also play out. So it's hereditary, and also because of the family consumption and the family experience and exposures too.
So who is predisposed to having stroke? Who can get it? Who cannot get it? Is there an age limit? I mean, if we're looking at the stories that we've shared, excuse me, if we're looking at the stories that we've shared today, thank you, we see a 40-year-old man, we see a 41-year-old man, so is it for people in their 40s, or it can happen to younger people, older people?
Interesting. Okay, why that is interesting is because I have a personal experience, okay. While working in the clinic house, there was this patient I used to see. She was first of all, let me tell you that stroke is not a respecter of age. It is not. There's a patient I was seeing that she was, I think, from 19 to 20 years, thereabout, and she was overweight. Or I hope she's no longer overweight, but as at then, she was overweight, and, she came in with a BP of 190/100, and that was quite alarming, because for that age, you should not be expecting such. When you're seeing BP as high as that, you should be expecting maybe 30, late 30s or early 40s, thereabouts, you understand? But at that age, she had why? Because she consumed, there was no diet modification, there was no limit to her diet, and I think there's a family history of obesity. Okay, so that could actually eventually lead to her having high blood pressure, okay, which she was already having at a very young age. She's already using antihypertensive drugs.
Wow.
Do you understand? So for someone like that, if she's not aware, if she didn't come out, for medical checkup, and that builds up, there could be a rupture in the blood vessels. And like what I was trying to describe about how stroke, occur. If the piping system to the apartment, which I was trying to, illustrate, right?
Yeah.
If it ruptures, okay, the blood starts seeping out and it starts irritating the brain, right? So you can realize that so there will now be a reduced supply of blood to the brain. And eventually the brain cells start dying. So that would have been what would happen in that case if she had not sought medical attention on time. And also there are some, I'm trying to give examples of the young people now, because we already have an understanding of why old people actually have this disease. But for young people, some of them could be, sickle cell, disease actually can
Okay.
predispose someone to have. Because in a sickle cell case, because of the shape of their red blood cells, there's this viscosity in the red blood cells, so it gets thick. It doesn't flow easy well in the blood vessels. So this eventually leads to a clot being formed in the blood vessels, and this would obstruct blood flow to the brain. Okay, or sometimes there could be a clot somewhere, and maybe due to change of position or exercise or so, it dislodges and it eventually blocks the artery that supplies the brain. And at the end of the day, it reduces blood flow to the brain, and eventually the brain cells dies. So it could actually happen in any age.
Wow.
Irrespective of age, trust me.
I mean, it's so interesting that, people don't even know how important this information that you were, giving this morning is. And I mean, so now that we know what stroke is and who is predisposed and the risk factors and all of that, what next? What can we do? What can be done? What are you supposed to do when you realize that I am not feeling this way? Who are you supposed to talk to? What are you supposed to run to? And I want to make this a two-part question.
Okay.
At times whereby you said it at the beginning of this conversation that it's an emergency case, but then we see people. I mean, for instance, his dad was on the floor for a long time. People were just there looking. What could they have done?
Okay, that's very nice. I think that's one of our mission as the for the NGO, to ensure that we create a massive awareness out there for people to know the symptoms or the signs of stroke. Or trust me, even if you don't know what the symptom or the signs of stroke, if you see someone lying flat and helpless and all, I think the first instinct we should actually do in such a case is to call for help. But it's quite unfortunate that I think we even know the emergency number of other countries than we know of our country. We know of 911, okay? So, but I really wish we can have such an emergency number to call so that outsiders cannot, even if they can't do anything, they can just call these people. Because in stroke, time is of essence. The first 3 hours of the onset of that, the first 3 hours after the onset of that symptom is very important, because the longer it takes, the damage is increasing, and the outcome of the patient recovering will determine on the period of or the amount of damage that has occurred over time. So when you see such a case, I think the first thing you should do, if you don't have a number to call, I don't think we do now, but I hope we do soon. So you could just take the person to the nearest.
I think there's some toll-free numbers.
Toll-free numbers, right? Have you tried them? Are they working? Okay, not sure. Okay, let's do that for another day. Okay, so I think the first thing you could do as a bystander is to take the person to the nearest healthcare facility.
Okay.
So that the person is seen by a healthcare professional as soon as possible, because we know this is an emergency. Okay, because when you take the person there, they have to. Okay, one of the things, because there are different types of stroke, right? There's a type that is caused by the blood forming in the blood vessel. That's called ischemic stroke. Okay. And the part that is caused by the rupturing of the blood vessels, that's the hemorrhagic stroke. So when you get to the hospital, the doctor or healthcare professional needs to know, okay, what kind of stroke am I dealing with here? Because the diagnosis is how will I put it? It's a clinical diagnosis. You don't even have to do tests to confirm that this person is having stroke. You can do tests to confirm your approach to how you will manage this person. Okay, so just by seeing this, you know that this is a stroke case. Paralysis on one side of the body, this face deviation and the likes. So when they get to the hospital, what the doctor wants to do is that they want to order for a CT scan. A CT scan is quite expensive, and I think that's part of the challenge we are having there, because some people might get to the hospital as soon as possible, but they might start going around looking for how to get funds to actually get this CT scan done. And I think one of the things he also mentioned, that they had some financial constraint. Okay, so, it's so sad, really, that's the healthcare system, we happen to live in now. Okay, so because these things don't come cheap, and they can't do anything as a healthcare professional, because you hear them telling you that, why have you not done a CT scan? You need to do a CT scan. Are you, the relative, are thinking that at least do something, at least just pass drip or do something, but they can't do. Why? Because anything they do, the result of that CT scan will determine how they manage the patient. So they need to get that result. Okay, because if they eventually give the wrong approach, you might eventually blame them for what they are doing. Yeah. So I think sometimes we need to understand why they request, what they request for. Because so in a case of ischemic stroke, if it is being confirmed that, okay, this case is an ischemic stroke, okay, there's some some injection that could be given to break the clots, right? But however, if it's a case of a rupturing, the maybe neurosurgeons need to be alerted. So I think that's the part of we understanding the importance of what the medical professional asks you to do, and the reason why they're not just asking you to just waste money and life, because they also want to help you, and you need to also be cooperative. So I think that is what's vital. But however, beyond that, I think knowing that the risk factors of stroke are highly preventable, that's the hypertension, the diabetes. If you know that you are hypertensive, I think it only makes sense to make sure that you take your medications. You shouldn't be told to, because trust me, it's cheaper to manage hypertension than managing stroke.
Okay.
Yes, it's cheaper, because at least just for you to take a medication, although there are some expensive ones, but there are some cheaper brands I think you could actually get, okay, than waiting until full-blown stroke. And even the amount you used to buy, so the amount you used to do a CT scan alone can buy you some BP drugs for like how many months? Do you get what I'm saying? So I think that's the part of, okay, ensuring that you take your medication. If you are diabetic, ensure you do a regular checkup of your blood sugar, and you are sticking to the diet modifications, right? So you need to, and also your lifestyle, you need to stop smoking. So all those things that predisposes, that increases your chance of having stroke, you need to really work on those things. And trust me, I think I have a mother that has been hypertensive for like more than 15 years now, but thank God it has not, we've not had any issue of, stroke attack or whatever, but we ensure that our medications are being taken and it's under control. So I think that's also very vital.
All right, so now let's talk about, you said some bits of lifestyle changes, but let's get into it. Let's talk about the things that you need to do as an individual, especially people that have risk factors or people that don't, people that are predisposed, or people that have a family history of hypertension or diabetes or not. Anybody, I mean, like you said, it's not a respecter of age or no one. It can happen to anybody. There are signs and sometimes there are not signs. What can people do?
Okay, so since we can't work on the ones we can't, that's the non-modifiable ones, you can't stop yourself from being in that family. You can't eat the family because of, you feel like, okay, you guys gave me stroke, I'm in this family because, but the ones you can work on, that's the fact that the obesity part. I think engaging in exercise would be of great help. If you know you are obese, you are overweight, okay, and some of you probably don't even know how to calculate these things, but I think it's quite easy. BMI, you could check your weight and over your height square, so you know what, you know where you actually fall in. If you realize that you are on the big side, you could register in a gym or two, or do some regular workouts, and you're not the kind that, okay, even if you are doing maybe you have a work that doesn't allow you to actually do a lot of exercise, maybe a banker or something. You're not the kind that maybe during maybe weekends you could try to do some workouts, some distance, and are not too far. You could do some trekking. It doesn't mean you don't have money. Okay, it's just because you are trying to take care of your health, because you know the risk that is that is on ground. So for those that have the ones, okay, that's the medical condition, you could ensure that your medications are taken at the right time. Ensure you go for your regular blood pressure check. Don't wait to be told. Don't wait for a medical outreach to come to your environment for you to now go and do your blood pressure. I think you could do a blood pressure check as cheap as 200 naira or 100 naira in the nearest chemist close to your house, just to know your numbers, you understand? And it helps you to also check yourself, okay, I need to continue with my medication. And many people think that, I think it's the would I put it as a knowledge gap? When they are diagnosed of being hypertensive or diabetic, they just think that, oh, when I use the medication once, I've treated it, I don't have to take it again. And that is not true. Okay, it's something that you have to use for the rest of your life. Okay, it might not be every day at some point. It could be maybe alternate days at some point, but you don't just stop. Because people that have stopped thinking that I've been treated, when they eventually, come to the hospital, they come with a full-blown stroke. Do you understand? So I think that's the part we can actually, work on. But the rest are things that I can't stop myself from getting old. So obviously, because age has to do with, because when you are getting older, the elasticity of the blood vessels sort of, reduces. So the blood vessels become hardened. Do you get? So it eventually results in you know, giving you a high chance of having stroke at the end of the day because it is narrowed, the blood vessels that are supplying the brain have been affected, do you understand? So you can't really do much about it, but the ones you can do something about, I think is not out of place to, you know, to be on top of it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hannah, for sharing so much with me this morning. But before I let you go, I need to ask you this one. People that have stroke, do they ever recover from it?
That's huge. Okay, I would answer the question this way. There's a type of stroke they call transient ischemic stroke, meaning transient, okay, don't let me, you know, confuse you with the old medical.
It's okay.
What it just basically means is that, okay, some people have the symptoms, that's the FAS, that's the facial deviation, the arm weakness or paralysis, or the slurred speech. Some of them have it within 24 hours, and those ones can recover, okay, because especially when they receive medical attention on time, so they can recover. But for those that, you know, have the full-blown stroke, right? Those ones, I can't give you an 100% that they are going to recover. Why? Because the duration, you understand, the duration, even if you get to the hospital as soon as possible, see, it takes within 3 to 4 hours thereabouts to even have this level of hope that there will be some level of recovery. So most of them eventually come down with some, will I put it like a defect or whatsoever, maybe the part of their body, they can't use it as it used to be used before. They can't comb their hair the way they used to do before. So they can recover, but they might not eventually, you know, get all their muscular activities back to how it used to be before. Some of them might lose their sensory, you know, level, ability to be able to feel touch and all. So that could eventually happen. And even some of them, I've seen cases where people recovered from stroke, but this speech, you know, there's still something wrong with the way they talk. It's still, it's still sort of affected. So it's not 100%, trust me, I would say. Especially looking at the healthcare system we have in Nigeria now, it's not really 100%, because before something is done, you know, it just takes this, you know, this long time and all. But at least we've seen cases where they improve, but they'll just have some, you know, reduced level of function.
Thank you so much for joining me this morning. I've learned a lot on the conversation that we've had on stroke. Major thanks to our guests, Dr. Samuel and Dr. Hannah, for breaking this conversation down for us. Now you know what to do. Check your blood pressure. We've said this several times. We'll continue to have this conversation. Also, if you are having a sedentary life, it's time for you to start changing that. Eat well, exercise, drink a lot of water. My name is Omobolade Oladipo.